Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Screen Society podcast that covers all things TV, movies, and everything in between. I'm your host, Logan, and today we're jumping back into Shrinking Season 3, Episode 6, titled Derek's Don't Die. This episode aired on March 4th, which was a Wednesday, written by CJ Hoke and Sasha Garin, directed by Randall Keenan Winston, and we got a really good episode. I thought coming off of the last episode, and I enjoyed last episode, but I think this one was much better as far as just the writing and character development that we got. I thought it hit some really deep moments, and I thought that we were going to get maybe a surprise or a twist here that really shook up the show. But fortunately, that was not the case, and we'll get into it. Obviously, the title kind of alludes to what's happening here in this episode, and that is Derek's Don't Die. So that's either referencing Derek 1 or Derek 2. And we got a really big moment, and one that I thought they were going to drag out into the next episode, but they didn't. They look like they have concluded that storyline of Derek, Liz's husband, being the one that was having some health issues that lead to him having a surgery, very important surgery, and one that can be touch and go for moments, but it ultimately ends up being a surgery that is well done. So we'll get into it. Let's jump into what happens in the episode. Again, we're going to talk kind of about the characters and what happens throughout the episode and not really go scene by scene as much, because I do feel like because there are so many characters and relationships to focus on, that's the best way to break it down. But episode 6 serves an emotional midpoint of season 3, shifting the focus from romantic complications and therapy hijinks to something very existential, more mortality and perspective. And a sudden medical crisis takes over, and it really impacts our characters. And you see, I think because this is the closest that they have gotten to death since Tia's death, you really do see the characters in the show go through a similar type of situation that they were dealing with in the fallout and aftermath of Tia's death. And this is the first time that they're having to face the fact that somebody that they all love in the friend group is in danger and could lose their life depending on what happens in the surgery and in the episode as well. And they do a really nice job of showing this throughout the episode. And we'll get into how each character reacts to the news that they've gotten that Derek is not doing well as far as his health is concerned. But the health scare is taken care of, and we do have a good result. So we don't have them having to now deal with even more grief after Tia's death. But the diagnosis, Derek receives an EKG at home, and it reveals something alarming. He has blockage in his left anterior descending artery, commonly called the widowmaker, which can cause a fatal heart attack. And some notes here. I mean, they obviously this is a well-to-do friend group. They live, I'm assuming it's in California because the hills in which they're walking in. I don't know if we've ever really gotten confirmation of this setting, but it definitely is filmed in the Los Angeles area, it seems. And they live in a very well-to-do neighborhood. And I think, and I don't know if we've ever gotten confirmation as to what Derek does, but I think Liz is a stay-at-home mom because she has or somebody that doesn't work because she has her rock business, but it seems like she doesn't go outside of the house for any kind of employment, and Derek does. And I think that Derek makes a lot of money, and I think this is all but confirmed just because of the size of their house and what they can afford, but also the fact that they raised Alice when Tia passed, and they had the funds and means to do that. I think because they are all therapists, they make pretty good money. And they also have a concierge doctor, which home care is what I'll call it, because that's what is on the lady's uniform that comes in to take the EKG. So he gets an EKG at home, and this is set up nicely when Derek and Liz go to Jimmy to try to get advice on how to best handle their son Matthew, and they even try to bribe him to take on Matthew as a client. And Liz uses the dead friend card and the fact that she also took care of Alice during the grieving process from Jimmy, which was about a year and a half to 2 years almost, of Liz taking care of Jimmy's daughter as if she was her own, because Jimmy was just grieving and really didn't focus too much on raising his kid. And this has been tackled in multiple instances throughout the season and throughout the show's existence, is that Jimmy was pretty absent in Alice's life for about a year and a half. And in that absence, Liz stepped up and really mothered her and gave her the guidance, and also helped Alice deal with her grievances and her grief, and trying to get past the death of her mother. So Alice has been used as kind of a bargaining chip for Liz as time has gone on now. Liz has brought up in multiple instances that she was the one that has raised Alice, and she always tries to use that to get Jimmy to do things. And Jimmy's like, "How many more times are you going to use that card and excuse to force me into doing things that maybe necessarily I don't want to do?" And she said, "Enough as I need to do it." So Liz has brought over, I think there were muffins, and I think it does sort of allude to maybe, or no, it definitely does, because Derek goes in to get a muffin or something, and Liz smacks his hand and goes, "No, these are for Jimmy, but also you have an EKG coming up, so you can't have those." And he's like, "Yeah, whatever." So he doesn't get the muffin, but they ultimately do. They end up bribing Jimmy enough to take on Matthew as a patient, and feeding him, and the work that he did with, or the work that they did with Alice, he's returning the favor, and they're not having to pay for sessions for Matthew to attend therapy. So eventually Matthew in this episode will go to Jimmy's office, and they start to unwind and unravel some of the issues that Matthew has as the episode goes on, but he has a hard time kind of getting through to Matthew. But the reason I break this up is Derek, early on in this episode, is getting EKG. The EKG is submitted by the home care specialist, and then it is submitted to Derek's cardiologist, and Derek's cardiologist immediately pings back that he needs to go to the emergency room, because that is right on the precipice of having a major heart attack, and one that is oftentimes deadly. And so he obviously goes to the hospital. He's going to get ready for surgery. And in the meantime, I mean, Liz is trying to cope with this, trying to deal with her son, and the rocky relationship and conflict that they have, after she was overheard saying that her son was an asshole, and the kid overheard that. So he's kind of iced her out, froze her out, and he's really got no contact with his mom right now. And as a 25-year-old, he's just trying to navigate what life is, and he's not been successful. They've, in the last couple of episodes, we've seen where they've tried to sever some ties and tried to hold his hand less and less as he is an adult, and they want him to figure out how to navigate life on his own and get through challenges on his own. And Liz and Derek have been trying to do their best to not coddle him anymore, because he is a full-grown adult and needs to figure this out on his own. But Matthew hasn't taken well to that, because he's always been coddled, and he decides to put it on silent mode, as far as just not listening and hearing from his parents, and he doesn't want to hear from them. So anytime they try to reach out, he's ignored it. And so that will eventually become a huge point in this episode towards the end. But Derek is going in for surgery. The crew is very worried. Jimmy is very concerned. And we can kind of get into how they all deal with coping with the fact that Derek's having to go in for surgery. Paul, I mean, we don't really get too much there. And Meg is still in town, his daughter. So we don't get too much into how they're really coping with it, because I guess they're not as close, I don't think, to Derek as much as Jimmy and Gabby are. Gabby and Derek number 2 go to the hospital with Jimmy. There's some really good stuff in this one when they're standing around the hospital bed as Derek's getting ready to go back to get his heart operated on to unblock that artery. There is multiple times where they make a joke or two about uh, dying and death. And there's even a point where, Derek keeps it lively whenever. I mean, he's always a really funny guy. And then Derek number two is also very funny. And they're having a conversation about what to expect. And he's explaining what's going on. And Jimmy is, of course, paranoid because he's just lost his wife recently. And I think that he is not okay and really trying to deal with this for the first time, dealing with death since it stared him in the face when his wife passed. And Jimmy is talking to Derek, and Derek's like, hey, if I pass, make sure to take care of Liz, but also, can you pee on the plants? Because I think they've come to expect it. And so he's like, I've been peeing off the balcony onto the plants and almost in Jimmy's backyard. And Jimmy makes the joke of like, yeah, it'll be weird not seeing, you flashing me, give me full frontal flashing, if you do go on and pass. So they make that joke, and he goes, of course, I'll pee on your plants for you. But Jimmy is like, you'll be fine. And everybody's encouraging Derek. And Derek's very different in the way that, and it shows a real human element. We'll get into that as we get further into this conversation. But Gabby and Derek number two are talking to him, and Derek says, hey, no worries, man. Like, Derek's don't die, which is the title of this episode. And I thought it was brilliant because the way Derek number one interacts, he is laying in bed, and he was like, you mean to say, he goes, what about your father? And Derek number two goes, you mean Derek Sr.? And Derek number one goes, yeah, like, what about Derek Sr.? And Derek number two goes, yeah, so Derek Sr., he's on a farm. We've sent him to a farm. And basically like what you would say when, you put a dog down or a pet runs away and you're trying to explain to kids that they went off to this farm and it's a magical place, and where they can have freedom to roam and freedom to live their life. And Derek's not buying it, obviously. It was really good. He's like, Liz goes, be quiet. Like, what are you talking about? That's awful that you said that. That is so not the truth. And he's so then the Derek's don't die that's not necessarily true because Derek Sr.'s dead. So that was a really good part. And then there's a part where Gabby goes, hey, you got this. We'll see you on the other side. And Derek's like, oh, that's encouraging. And she goes, no, not that other side, like death, afterlife. I meant on the other side of surgery. And he goes, yeah, of course. So that was a really good moment. And then we get a really nice conversation between Liz and Derek. And this is building up to, how different people deal with different things. Obviously, the person in the bed is going through a lot of different emotions because they're the ones that their life is at risk, and he's getting ready to go under anesthesia and then have surgery, and he doesn't know how that's going to go. And things can happen and this could lead to death, and he might not come out of this. And so you can tell he's now reflecting on his life, and he's talking about his kids. And the biggest point here is that the sons, Matthew and Will, are not there at the bedside to talk to their father, who's going in for, I'm assuming, open heart surgery is what they have to go in and perform, and to try to unblock that artery. And Liz and him are talking about that. And I think Derek is having these moments of, he's thinking about what they're currently going through with the conflict with Matthew. And there's a moment where Liz is, she's talking about what happens after surgery and, life after surgery. And, he's going to be fine and this and that. And Liz is very optimistic about, obviously, Derek coming out of this. And Derek is trying to go through and, he goes, if I die, he's had some really good lines. He was like, if I die, just know that when you're going around the house and you're finding snacks hidden everywhere, he goes, don't think any less of me as a person, which was really funny. Just I picture all like these Twinkies like taped underneath couches and things that Derek goes in and he finds, and that he's hidden from other people so they don't eat them, and he wants to eat his snacks. And he's talking about what where everything is, where the passwords are. He goes, the passwords are all the same. They're all different names I have for your boobs. And so that was a cute moment between husband and wife. And again, it's very light, but then Derek gets real serious because I think as he's thinking through this, he really is thinking that which I think is pretty normal in these situations, is to like death is always imminent, whether it's now or later. And I think that he thinks that the surgery is not going to end the way that he wants it to. And so that's got him in a panic, and he's trying to think about how to best cope with that. And that's got to be really scary. I mean, at any point, death is scary because it's such an uncertainty, and you never know when it's going to come, because death comes to everybody doorstep at some point. And there's different moments that you can probably there's obviously higher risk of death, and this is definitely one of those moments. And so Derek is really going through that, and Liz is trying to stay positive, and as one will, you're not going to die, you're going to be fine, like we're going to get through this, and then on the other side we're going to get you healthy, and you'll have a normal life after, and you'll come out of this and see the boys, and everything will be fine. And Derek kind of has that realization of like, well, yeah, but what if it doesn't? I need you to be prepared. And he's trying to prepare Liz, but he's also trying to prepare himself. And then Liz is like, no, like, I don't want you to think like that. And he goes, just let me feel these things. Let me say these things, because I need to say them for my own comfort. And almost as a form of like, I need to say goodbye to you in case this doesn't work out well. And they have a great moment. She is clearly very visibly upset, and he's upset, but also, they have a good moment of like, we'll get through this. We'll see you on the other side. And he goes off for surgery, and they have a nice moment where they're holding hands, and it kind of lingers. And she says that she loves him, and he loves her too. And I thought it was really great how they broke that down. But again, we don't really see Liz break down too much here. She does have like this overly optimistic view of like what is going to happen in the surgery. She's so very confident in what the outcome is going to be, when ultimately that's just not how life works. Like as much as you want to be confident that this surgery is going to work, like things can happen, and Derek could pass, and that could be the last time that she talks to him. But she doesn't really have like this overwhelming emotional breakdown or attack until later in the episode, where she goes home from the hospital to gather things, because he's going to have to stay in the hospital. She's going home, and most people probably do this, but like if the surgery is going to be a long surgery, there are times where some people will leave to go gather things because they just want to keep their mind off of what is happening. And so she's going back home to gather some of his things to make him more comfortable when he's done with surgery. And so she goes in, and then Jimmy notices that the car is in the driveway. So he comes over to their house, and he interacts with Liz, and he goes, he goes, how you doing? And she starts to go into like all the things she's doing to grab stuff for Derek. And he goes, no, like seriously, how are you doing? I'm of course concerned about how you're handling this and what could happen and what you're thinking. And Liz then does break down. She goes, I can't do this without him. And she goes, I know that you were strong enough and courageous enough to do this without Tia, and I commend you for that. But I can't. Like, I myself, Liz, can't handle if he were to die. And it was such a big moment. And you finally see Liz break down. She does start to cry, and Jimmy hugs her. And she goes, I just don't know what I would do without Derek. And I think there's a lot of things going on, right? I think Liz obviously loves him tremendously, but I still think she's still reeling a little bit from the fact that she cheated on Derek, and she still feels guilty about that. Because I don't know if we've ever really seen her confront that again. I still felt like that was under the surface, still boiling up, that we still have this realization from Liz that she still feels like she's betrayed his trust some. And now they've got conflict with their kid. And I just feel like Liz is at a point in her life where she's really reflecting on how things have gone, and they've not gone well over the last couple of years. And she's lost her best friend. She cheated on her husband. Her kids are a mess. And she just feels like she just can't do anything right. And the one thing that she can do right is to care for her husband in time of need. And that is what she's doing. And, caring for Paul with his Parkinson's, like that's what she's doing. She's keeping herself occupied. But I think she doesn't ever take the time. And this is another thing that people will deal with grief like this, where they will keep themselves so busy and occupied that they don't have time to sit back, reflect, and have that breakdown, have those emotions, feel those things, talk about those things. And that's very important that you do that. You don't want to, you hear people all the time that are dealing with death that they'll go to work and be like, I couldn't sit around and just kind of, you know, feel all these things and have these breakdowns. I need to keep my mind occupied because if I sit there, that's all I think about. That's all I want to think about. And so they try to keep themselves busy. And that can be important. But if you overdo it where you never take the time to actually grieve and feel the sadness and the anger and go through the grieving process and the steps that you need to take to grieve, then you're not properly grieving. And then mentally that can become a huge hurdle to get around. And you're building this climactic breakdown up, and that's what it feels like. It definitely feels like, and it's really great because and Kristen Miller is really good at this. Kristen Miller, if you've watched Scrubs, she was Jordan in that. She's always had like this, maybe she's like this in real life, and that's why she plays it so well. But she definitely has this harder exterior where she definitely is a strong female character that really just doesn't, she wears her emotions on her sleeve, but not sadness. Like she'll never show you that she's sad. And she did this in the last show that I watched with Scrubs. She doesn't show you that she's sad. She is just somebody that just perseveres and keeps going. No matter what the challenges are, she breaks them down and she can keep going. And the people around her, she can pick up and lift up. And that's always been kind of her character's build here and shrinking. I feel like she's really defining that strong, independent character that the group really needs her to be a stabling force. And when she's not a stable force, that's when things are really strange, I think, for the people around her, is because they feel that vibe from her that she's not doing well. And Jimmy realizes this, and Jimmy has had to try to cope. And she was there for Jimmy when he was grieving. And now Jimmy's like, if something were to happen to Derek, just know that I'm here for you. I can be here for you, and I am ready to be here for you. Which is cool because we've not really seen Jimmy at this point yet, where we feel that he could be a stabling element in somebody's life. And now we like a stabling presence in somebody's life. And now we feel like that he is starting to move on and he's grieved enough to where we really feel like he is at a really good spot. So Derek comes out of the surgery okay, but before that happens, the boys do show up. So Matthew is confronted by Jimmy. So let's get into Matthew here for a little bit. Matthew does he goes and sees Jimmy at his office. Jimmy is going through a session with him, and Matthew is just not opening up. He's got no interest in opening up, and it's very immature the way he handles it. At one point, he goes, let's talk about your job or something, or jobs and career, or where you're heading in life. And he goes, and he throws a thumbs up, and he sticks his tongue out and does the raspberry noise. And he's like, no, we're not talking about anything. And very childlike for a 25-year-old. He lays down on the couch, and it was funny. Jimmy goes, no, we don't do that here. And he goes, I thought that was the whole idea. That's the whole, that's the stereotype, is that you come in and you lay down and then the therapist talks to you and you're laying down on the couch. He goes, no, that's very Freudian. And Jimmy goes, actually, it's probably best that we don't get in. And Matthew's like, yeah, let's do that. And he goes, no, it's probably best that we don't do that. And he goes, Matthew says something along the lines of like, does that guy still practice or something? Or like, I want to talk to that guy. And he goes, well, that'd be very hard because that guy is very dead. Like, you can't talk to him because he wants to lay down. He's like, well, you can't speak to Freud because he's dead. And so that was a good moment. And then there's another moment where, they're talking about like why he froze out his mom, and he's just not having it. And Matthew is just very much like, I just don't want to talk to you at all. Like, could care less. Don't want to talk. She's in the wrong. I'm 25 years old. He does open up a little bit where he says that I don't know what all you people want from me, but I'm just 25 years old. And I think that's a really good point. I mean, at 25, man, like nobody has their life truly together. There is so much learning you have to do from that age till, I mean, I'm 33 and I'm still learning every single day. So I think that's really tough for him. And I think that he's not wrong, but also he's not right. Like, I think very much is that I think that he is really struggling with the fact that there are so many expectations with him. And I think that there is also this expectation of what he is supposed to be in life. And through many challenges that he's had, he's not really overcome them. And you as you become an adult, you want to have that foundation of overcoming problems, overcoming the challenges that you might have. And Jimmy's just like, we want you to understand your parents don't hate you. They're just trying to make you into a better adult. And so that's where we really do get into conversation with Jimmy and Matthew. And then Jimmy ends up getting frustrated. They, in their session, it doesn't go well. And then Jimmy notices that Matthew and Will aren't at Derek's bedside when he's going in for a surgery that could end his life, which is crazy that the kid decided not to show up. He'd been informed that it had happened, but he didn't decide to show up. Jimmy goes and confronts him and goes, "Whatever the hell's wrong with you, you need to figure it out." Like, very tough love, Jimmy. Like, he goes, don't let this be. He goes, if I had the opportunity to say something to Tia one last time, I would have. And now you're going to let this opportunity slip. And if something were to happen to your dad and you weren't there for your mom, this is going to get real ugly. And basically gave him a bunch of tough love for it. He goes, you're going to regret this moment in your life. Matthew, it resonates. So he does end up going to the hospital. He ends up calling his brother. His brother goes to the hospital as well to go see his dad after surgery. But as he's in surgery, when Liz returns, Matthew goes in and he talks to his mom and he says, sorry for being an ass, basically. And he goes, I just want you to know that I care about you. And there's this very cool moment where he's asking if she needs anything to eat, and he'll go get a sandwich for her. And it's just a really good moment. And he goes to hug her, and when he hugs her, he drops his arms. She goes, don't drop your arms. I need this. And so it was cool to see her boys show up when it was most needed. It was a little late, but they do end up showing up for them anyway. And I think that's a big step forward. And Liz, I think in that moment feels like it would be very difficult to get through life without Derek, but she knows that the emotional support there with her kids and her friends, if worse comes to worse, maybe she could, and she's strong enough. So yeah, that was a really good moment. We finally get some resolution to Matthew and Liz and Derek. Surgery outcome ends up being very successful. Derek's don't die. that's what is said, as Derek is back and doing well post surgery, post operation. Brian in this episode. So let's shift our focus over to Brian. Brian in this episode is confronting the fact that he has never told his father that they had a kid, that he and Charlie had a kid, and you can tell, I guess, they've had a pretty rocky relationship, that when he came out as being gay, when he started to date Charlie, when he's marrying Charlie, there's even, like he said, I even had a hard time telling him I was into musicals and everything else. And when I told him I won the lead role in a musical, he goes, okay, cool, whatever. Like, he goes, I think he says this, he says that anytime that he has ever broken big news, his dad has always said, okay, and like basically very condescending and very judgmental of the things that he is doing throughout his life. And it sounds like he wasn't very open to his son being gay. And so that's been kind of a conflict in that. And Brian goes and visits Jimmy, and Jimmy is talking. I forget what the patient's name is, but he breaks in and he's very theatrical. And the patient goes, yeah, I need to do something like this guy is doing right here in front of you. But he goes, not as dramatic. And he goes, that's very homophobic. Brian goes, that's homophobic. He goes, yeah, I can see where you think that because the way that he said it. And Jimmy goes, Brian, what do you want? I'm with a patient. He goes, I need to talk to you. The patient ends up leaving. But he's like, I haven't told my father. And he goes, how do I do it? Like, how can I do this and play this role of like, and he's trying to lie. He's trying to skirt around. He's trying to deflect. And Jimmy's like, you know what? And Jimmy calls Brian's dad, Kip. And he's like, Kip, Brian has some news for you. And Brian's like, damn it, Jimmy, like, why'd you do that? So he goes, hey, Dad, just so you know, Charlie and I are having a kid. We found some knocked up lady, and now she's going to give us her child. And he was like, wait, what? And he goes, when is she due? And he goes, Jimmy like grabs the phone. He's like, he's lying to you. She's already due. He's already due. Or she's already due, and she's already had the kid, and the kid's here, and her name is Sutton. She's beautiful. And Brian's like, damn it, Jimmy, like, why did you sell me out? He goes, I wanted to lie. He goes, I wanted to lie and tell him that, that we didn't have the baby yet, and blah, blah, blah. And it ended up being the fact that Brian is just trying to figure out how to tell his dad that, because everything that he's ever broken news to tell his dad has just never been, it has never been something that, that they really wanted to, or sorry, it has never gone well whenever Brian has had big news and he's had to break it to his dad. So that's ultimately why it was a big thing between Brian and his dad. Brian's dad is happy. He goes, so I'm going to be a grandpa. He is thrilled with the news, Kip, and Brian is overwhelmed. He goes, yeah, I'll send you guys pictures of the baby Sutton whenever I get home. And that was really cool. So Brian's dad's very happy. Brian gets over the fact of maybe having to tell his father news that he was afraid that his father wouldn't have enjoyed. Jumping over to Sean, pretty quiet storyline in this one. He reveals to Paul that he has a chance to interview with a sous chef position at a high-end restaurant because the sous chef comes and tries his food truck, which is really cool. Paul's advice: focus on the present, appreciate the progress and process of going through that. Don't worry about failing, because Sean's a little bit worried that he might fail, or he doesn't know what to do with the food truck and what the future looks like. And Sean, I think we leave the episode, we don't really know what he's thinking as far as like what I'm trying to think if we have a scene at all, because I think they don't interview Sean, and so we'll possibly be getting that in the next episode. So I don't think we have any conclusion on that, but I think it'll come down to he'll probably get the job, but also have to decide what he wants to do with the food truck. Is my guess. So Sean's done really well. Paul is pretty much relieving him of coming to him. Paul obviously is transitioning out as a therapist, and now it seems like Sean is done with what he needs to do, and might not need to speak to a therapist. And he might continue to speak to the therapist, but he's gotten to a point where Paul's pretty much like, you've done all the work that you need to do to this point to not really need my advice right now. So I'm sure he'll continue to get therapy, but it does seem like they are at a really, really good spot in his overall mental health journey. Alice and Jimmy. Alice in this one isn't really in this episode, besides she's the bargaining chip between Liz and Jimmy. But there is a scene where Jimmy, when he has to go tell Alice that Derek is having heart surgery, and she's like, "You doing all right?" Because she's doing a lot better in her journey with grieving. And you can still tell Jimmy is rattled, because he's thinking Tia's death now and also Derek's death. So he's very nervous about what could happen if Derek dies. And he goes, I'm just trying to kill some time, and hopefully Derek's surgery will be done soon, so I don't have to keep worrying about everybody. And Alice goes, do you need a hug or anything? And he goes in, can I touch your head? And he like grabs her head. She goes, why did you pick the one thing I didn't want you to do? So it's just his way of grieving. Like Jimmy's just trying to not grieve, but get over the worry that somebody else close to him might be dying. And so that is, life is fragile, relationships matter, and Jimmy is very aware of that. Jimmy and Meg, the episode started with Jimmy and Meg. They had slept together, they had sex, and we learned that Meg is separating from her husband. And Paul, she assumes Paul's going to be happy, because Paul is always making jokes about how awful her husband is, and he doesn't really like him. But there was a really great moment where Meg is getting ready to go back to Connecticut, and they're sitting on the couch, and Paul is like, she finally tells him that they're separated, and he's like, I never wanted you to be unhappy or him to be unhappy. I joke around about your husband because I don't really like him, but and I don't know if he doesn't not like him. I just don't feel like he's really invested in him. But like, She goes, he was like, I don't want you to ever be sad or him to ever be sad. That's never what I wanted. I mean, that's never been my intention of making these jokes. And so they have a really good moment. And she's like, I was afraid to tell you that we were separated and what you might think. And he goes, I care about if you're happy. That's all I care about. So whatever you need to do to be happy, do that. And she's like, how do I tell my kid and our kid? And he's like, well, I told you when we were getting divorced, like your mother and I. And she goes, yeah, Dad, I went to a motel and there was some lady that was naked. And she goes, or he was like, yeah, she was in a robe. And I know that was probably alarming. She goes, she wasn't in a robe until I got there. And it was something about nipple piercing. She goes, I saw nipple piercing for the first time. You see, you learn something every day. So that was a good moment. Meg and Paul, there's still no admittance that that Jimmy and Meg had slept together. So that'll be interesting when that all comes out. And then we also have the last thing I want to talk about, Gabby and Maya, a dangerous boundary. Gabby's storyline centers on her increasingly complicated relationship with her patient Maya. You've got the patient friend element where Maya doesn't really have friends that she can count on. We actually get her scrolling through Instagram of pictures of her and her old friend group. So we can only assume that this is not gone well. Like every friend group she's ever been a part of have kind of abandoned her because of her mental health issues, I think. So she's feeling real lonely at the end of this episode. And it ends with it. She calls Gabby and they've talked about how they've gone to trivia together and that they've had some really good moments there when they were talking about trivia. They said that the next week's trivia would be national parks. And Maya's like, yeah, we should probably recruit Smokey the Bear so we can beat the crusty, what'd she call him? The crusty man bun people or something like that would beat him in trivia. And Gabby's like, yeah, we need more people on our team. And Maya, I think, has internalized this idea that she just is very lonely, that nobody really wants to spend time with her. And so she calls Gabby because Gabby has told her, if you're ever drinking wine and you're getting ready to hit the drugs with the wine, make sure to call me. Xanax and wine do not go together. And she calls her and Gabby's always been telling her, like, find people that are important that will kind of drop everything they need to do in order to take care of you. And she goes, I'll always be a phone call away. Just let me know if you're ever having problems. But because Gabby's at the hospital with Derek, she goes, I'm at the hospital. Can I call you back? Is it important? Do you need something? And Maya's like, no. And then you can just see it. Like, she is clearly struggling with loneliness and not having people important enough in her life to care about any call that she ever makes to them. And it's just a really sad moment. Maya then goes back to drinking a bottle of wine, which it looks like she's gone through the whole bottle, and she's really, really struggling with that. So I think that's where the next episode is going to pick up. I hope nothing happens to Maya, but like it's starting to lean that way where something might seriously happen to Maya, where, Gabby's really walking this tightrope of being a friend versus being her therapist. So this can get a little bit muddy. This is where it is muddy, where Maya's calling her as a friend. Gabby received the call thinking of her as a client. And I think that's where it really got muddied. So we'll see what happens with that relationship, but that is ultimately what we leave this episode with. And it was a short episode. That was pretty much it. I mean, there was not a whole 50 minutes of this. They did it very quickly in their storytelling, but man, was it very impactful between Jimmy's grief and Liz's grief and Derek dealing with death and confronting mortality and Sean, trying to figure out what he wants to do with his future now that he seems to have his life all figured out for the most part right now. So what a great episode. I mean, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was a very, very good episode, very deep, cut very deep with Liz and Derek's relationship and how they were trying to cope with what was going on in that situation when there is a major health scare like that. How everybody deals with that is very different, and the way that they talk about it. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you are over on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It helps people find us. Also, if you are over on Apple or Spotify, make sure to give us a 5-star rating or whatever you feel to rate us, and give us a comment so people can find the show as well. But if you want to find us over on social media, we're at the Screen Society Podcast. I'll drop the usernames in the show notes as well, so that way you can give us a follow there. But again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time when we talk Season 3, Episode 7 of Shrinking.